It was one of those quiet Thursday evenings when the house feels a bit too still. The kind where the hum of the fridge sounds louder than it should and the clock ticks just slow enough to make you notice every second. Mara was upstairs, straightening her hair. I could hear the occasional buzz of the flat iron and the sound of hangers clinking against each other in our shared closet. She always took her time getting ready, especially when it came to events related to her office. Tonight, she said it was a team celebration, some kind of work party to honor the end of a big project. I nodded and told her to enjoy it. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That was the first crack. She walked down the stairs in a tight navy dress I didn't recognize. New, definitely. Something she hadn't worn for me. It hugged her waist like it was made for someone else's eyes. She grabbed her clutch and glanced at her reflection one last time in the hallway mirror. I might be home late, she said, avoiding eye contact. I'll leave the porch light on, I replied. She kissed me on the cheek like I was a relative she barely knew and slipped out the door. I tried not to think too hard about it. I really did. I poured myself a drink, sat on the couch, turned on a documentary I wasn't really interested in, just something to keep my thoughts from spiraling. But about 25 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a hotel reservation notification. I blinked. At first, I assumed it was spam. But then I looked again. The app was linked to Mara's email. We had it connected back when we booked our anniversary trip to Santa Fe. The message read, "Check-in confirmed, the Garden View Hotel, room 604. Time, 9:13 p.m. My heart sank. Her office party was supposed to be at a rooftop downtown, not at some hotel 30 minutes away. I opened maps. The Garden View Hotel wasn't even near her workplace. I didn't even grab my coat. I just got in the car. The entire drive was this tug-of-war between hope and dread. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe someone else checked in using her name. Maybe, but I knew better. I just didn't want to admit it yet. The hotel was tucked behind a row of restaurants and boutiques. Expensive. Private. Intimate. Her car was parked 2 rows from the entrance. The lights in room 604 were on. I walked in through the side door, hoping no one would stop me. No one did. I rode the elevator in silence. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't have a speech or a plan. I just had a feeling, the kind that weighs on your chest like a brick. Outside room 604, I heard music. Soft jazz. And laughter. Mara's laughter. But it wasn't the version of her I knew. It was lighter, flirtier, the kind she hadn't used around me in years. Then I heard a man's voice. I froze. Every instinct told me to turn around, go home, pretend I never saw it. But I couldn't. Something in me needed the truth even if it shattered everything else. I stood there, breathing shallow, staring at the room number like it was about to change my life. And then the door opened. Not fully. Just slightly. But enough for me to see her standing in dim light, barefoot, smiling at someone inside. And that was the moment I stopped being the husband I used to be. That was the moment everything cracked open. The door wasn't supposed to open. Not like that. Not in that moment. It was like the universe itself had pulled the handle just enough to let the truth spill out. I didn't speak. I didn't move. Neither did she. For a second, we both just stood there frozen, staring at each other. She was barefoot, wearing a silky, wine-colored robe tied loosely at the waist. Her hair was slightly damp, like she'd just come out of the shower. And in her eyes, shock. Pure, unfiltered shock. But not guilt. Not sadness. Just the panic of being caught. "Jeremy," she finally whispered, her voice cracking at the edges. "What are you doing here?" She asked it like I was the one out of place. Like I was invading her moment. Like the man standing behind her, shirtless and smug, didn't just prove everything I'd been doubting for months. I stepped forward. Just one step. Just enough to see him clearly. He didn't flinch. He didn't say a word. He just raised his eyebrows as if this was some kind of awkward misunderstanding. Mara looked between us like she was waiting for one of us to give her an out. I didn't give her one. "You checked in under your name," I said quietly. The app sent me a notification. Same one we used for our anniversary. Her mouth opened, then closed. She had nothing. The man behind her, tall, younger than me, maybe early 30s, finally spoke. "Look, man, maybe this isn't the best place for this." "You don't get to talk," I said, my voice calm. Too calm. He looked down, realizing his mistake. Mara stepped into the hallway, gently closing the door behind her, but not all the way. "Jeremy, I didn't want you to find out like this," she said. Her eyes darted everywhere but mine. "It's complicated." That word. Complicated. As if what she did was some messy but noble decision. "How long?" I asked. She hesitated. "A few months." I nodded slowly. "So every business dinner, every late meeting, every client trip, it was him?" She didn't deny it. I turned and walked toward the elevator. She followed. Jeremy, wait. I never meant to hurt you. Things haven't been good between us for a while. I didn't know that, I said, cutting her off. Because I was still trying. We reached the elevator. I pressed the button. She stood behind me, silent now, maybe realizing there was nothing she could say that would fix this. The elevator dinged. As I stepped in, I looked at her one last time. I would have forgiven you, I said. Even now. If you had just told me. But you made a fool of me instead. The doors closed. And just like that, everything we built in 11 years felt like it collapsed in 11 seconds. I drove home in silence. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't cry. I didn't even scream. I just kept replaying her face in my mind. The way she looked at me when she realized I knew. That strange mix of fear and frustration, not because she hurt me, but because her lie wasn't safe anymore. When I got home, the house felt different. Colder. Smaller. As if it knew. I walked into her bedroom, sat at the edge of the bed, and stared at the half-open closet where her clothes hung, neat, untouched, organized by color. My mind kept drifting back to the way she smiled at him. That effortless warmth that used to be mine. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was angry, but because I realized I didn't even know who I'd been sleeping next to for the last year. I watched the sunrise through the window blinds that morning, but I didn't feel its warmth. The orange light fell across the floorboards like it always did, soft and calm, but the world in my head was anything but. I hadn't moved from the edge of the bed. Just sat there. 4 hours. No phone. No distractions. Just silence and questions that had no satisfying answers. You always imagined that if something like this ever happened to you, if your partner cheated, you'd have some sort of cinematic reaction. Rage. Shouting. Breaking a lamp. Tossing a suitcase onto the lawn. But the real thing? It's quieter. Slower. Like your body shuts down to protect you from exploding. At 6:41 a.m. I heard the garage door open. She came home. I didn't get up. She walked into the room slowly, as if trying to gauge whether I'd be asleep. When she saw me sitting there fully dressed, fully aware, she flinched a little, just enough to show me she wasn't ready for the reality she had to face. Jeremy, she said, her voice raspier than usual, like she hadn't slept either. Can we talk? Start talking, I said without looking at her. She stood awkwardly near the door, holding her purse like it was a shield. I know you hate me right now. I don't hate you, Mara, I replied. I just don't know you anymore. That broke something in her. Her face dropped. She sat on the far corner of the bed like we were strangers forced to share a bench at a train station. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, she said. I swear to you, I didn't plan any of this. People don't trip and fall into hotel beds, I said, still staring out the window. She flinched again. I know what I did. But you have to understand. I felt invisible for a long time. Like I was just floating through our marriage, waiting for some kind of spark to come back. And then he noticed me. He made me feel I turned to her finally. You could have told me that before you found someone else. You could have said you felt lonely. I would have done anything, Mara. I was scared, she whispered. Scared that if I said it out loud, it would mean it was already over. But cheating doesn't make it less over. It just adds betrayal to the end. She started crying. Not hysterically. Just a slow, silent stream of tears that she didn't even bother wiping away. I ruined everything, she said. I didn't correct her. She needed to sit with that. But then she added something that made my stomach twist. I don't love him, she said suddenly. I never did. It wasn't about him. It was about feeling like someone wanted me again. That part hurt the most. Because I did want her. Every day. Even when she was distant, cold, or distracted. I still made her coffee every morning. I still waited up for her when she was late. I still kissed her shoulder before falling asleep. But I guess my kind of love wasn't exciting enough to compete with attention from someone new. We sat there in silence. I could tell she was waiting for me to give her a path forward, some opening that meant I might forgive her, that we might fix it. But I had no idea where to even start. I need you to pack a bag, I finally said. You can stay at your sister's place for a while. I need time. Her lips trembled. Are you saying it's over? I'm saying I don't know, I replied honestly. But I can't think clearly with you here. She nodded, stood up slowly, and walked toward the closet. As she gathered her things, I noticed how small her presence suddenly felt in the house. Like the gravity she used to have was gone, and she was just another person packing for a trip they didn't want to take. She left 20 minutes later. No screaming. No dramatic final plea. Just a quiet goodbye and a door closing behind her. And then silence again. Only this time it felt heavier. That afternoon I opened her laptop. Not to spy. But to understand. I needed the full truth, not just the scraps she decided to share. What I found changed everything. Because it wasn't just a few months. It wasn't even just him. There were others. There's a kind of betrayal that's immediate like a slap. And then there's the slow kind, the kind that unwraps itself layer by layer until what you're left holding isn't just pain, but a realization that the person you loved had become someone entirely different right under your nose. I opened Mara's laptop because I wanted clarity. I didn't expect to burn down the last pieces of trust one had left. The laptop wasn't even password protected. That hurt more than I expected. Not because she trusted me with it, but because she didn't even care to hide anything anymore. It felt careless. Dismissive. Like I'd already been written off in her story and she'd stopped pretending a long time ago. At first, I opened the browser. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. But then I saw the bookmarks bar. A hidden folder renamed with just a period, dot. One click and it opened a row of saved message threads, Google Docs, and file transfers. My hands went cold. The messages weren't just with the man I saw at the hotel. His name was Rick. I found dozens of messages with him, all of them disgusting in their intimacy. But what shattered me was discovering there were two others. One was someone named Trevor, apparently a former co-worker she kept in touch with long after leaving the company. The other was a man named Jay, saved only by his initial, and judging by the tone of their messages, he was the one she went to when she wanted to feel wild and unfiltered. Reading the things she said to them was like reading someone else's life. She talked about me. How she was suffocating in suburbia. How I was too soft. How I didn't make her feel like a woman anymore. She called our marriage reliable but dull. And that phrase, reliable but dull, echoed in my head like a sentence I'd been given without ever standing trial. I didn't realize I'd started crying until I felt it hit my shirt. It wasn't even the fact that she cheated. It was how she rewrote our life together in her mind, reduced every quiet gesture, every sacrifice, every just checking in text I ever sent to something pitiful. As if loving her gently was a weakness. As if being loyal was boring. I closed the laptop slowly. I didn't throw it. I didn't yell. I just sat there, staring at the empty kitchen, wondering how long she had been erasing me from her heart. Around 3 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was her. Mara, can we talk later tonight? I'm at Claire's. I don't want to leave things like this. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have words, but because I had too many. Instead, I got up, grabbed a box from the garage, and began clearing out the closet. I wasn't angry. I wasn't trying to erase her. I just needed space to remember who I was before she turned our life into her backup plan. I found the anniversary scrapbook I made for her our 5th year, the one she cried over when I gave it to her. Turns out those tears probably weren't about joy. Maybe guilt. Maybe shame. Maybe neither. I put it in the box. I packed her perfume bottles, the silk robe I saw her in last night, her favorite throw pillow she always clutched during movies. It was like stripping the house of a ghost who had been pretending to still be alive in our story. Then I walked into my office and wrote her an email. Not a text. Not a phone call. An email. Because if she could reduce our marriage to pixels and message threads, then that's how I'd respond. Subject: you asked if we could talk. Body: I think everything that needed to be said was said without words. I'll be staying in the house. You can make arrangements for your things. Please don't contact me for a while. I need space to breathe. Jeremy. I hit send. Then I sat on the front porch and let the silence surround me again. But this time it didn't feel heavy. It felt like the first breath of air after being underwater too long. And deep down I knew this wasn't just the end of a relationship. It was the beginning of something else. Something I never asked for, but maybe, just maybe, something I needed. The silence between us held for exactly 2 days. Mara didn't reply to my email, didn't show up at the house, and didn't try to call again. I thought maybe she got the message, or maybe she was too embarrassed to fight back. But on the 3rd morning I got a call, not from her, but from her mother. She asked if Mara was okay. I didn't answer right away. Why wouldn't she be? Her mom hesitated. She came over yesterday crying. She wouldn't say what happened. She just said you kicked her out and she was scared she'd lost everything. I could have lied. I could have said it was just a rough patch. But something in me snapped. Not from anger, from clarity. She's been cheating on me, I said plainly. With at least 3 different men. Her mother went completely quiet. Then she whispered, "Oh my God." Turns out this wasn't the first time Mara had taken shortcuts in her relationships. Back in college, her mom caught her sneaking out to meet an ex while she was dating someone else. She thought Mara had changed. She always runs when she gets bored, her mother told me. But this time she ruined the one good thing she ever had. That one sentence made something stir inside me. Not pride. Not vengeance. Just a sadness I didn't know I'd still feel. That afternoon I went back into the guest room which I'd turned into my temporary space. I opened my laptop and finally told someone what had happened, someone outside the family, someone who didn't know either of us personally. A lawyer. I wasn't sure what I wanted at first. Not revenge. Not punishment. Just boundaries. Something clean. Something that allowed me to reclaim my space, my time, my identity. We didn't have kids and I owned the house before we got married. The lawyer confirmed it would be a relatively straightforward separation, but he also asked me something I hadn't considered. Do you want to file first? I sat with that for a while, because filing first meant I was no longer waiting for her to undo the damage. It meant I was acknowledging it was unfixable. So I said yes. And the process began. By the end of that week, papers were drafted. The next challenge was delivering them, and that moment turned out to be something I never expected. Because by then, the story had already started leaking into her world. Claire, Mara's sister, had found out the truth. She called me crying. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she said. "I would have made her leave him months ago. I thought you two were happy. I thought it was just stress. I didn't know she." "Jeremy, I'm so sorry." I told her it wasn't her fault. But she asked for permission to speak honestly with Mara, and I gave it. I was done protecting her from the consequences of her actions. That weekend, Mara tried to come back to the house. She didn't bring bags or keys. Just herself, a pale face, and trembling hands. I met her at the porch and stepped outside before she could walk in. "I'm not here to fight," she said, almost begging. "I know what I did. I know I don't deserve a second chance, but..." I handed her the envelope. Inside were the divorce papers. She stared at them for a long time without speaking. Then her eyes flicked up, locking with mine. "I never thought you'd actually do this," she said. I gave her the most honest answer I could. "That's the problem." She nodded, lips pressed tight, tears welling but not falling. Then she said something that twisted the knife even deeper. "They already dropped me from the project." "What?" "The firm found out. Someone forwarded screenshots. I don't know who. Probably Claire. HR called yesterday. Said I breached internal conduct policies by having a personal relationship with a vendor. So it wasn't just her marriage she lost. It was her job. Her reputation. Her version of herself." She broke down right there on the porch. Not in a fake, manipulative way, but in the kind of raw, exposed grief that only shows up when someone realizes their illusion of control has collapsed. "I lost everything," she kept whispering. "I lost everything." I didn't comfort her, because I wasn't hers anymore. She left without another word. And as the door closed, I didn't feel victorious. I just felt lighter. And for the first time in years, I looked around the house and realized it could be mine again, not a prison of memories, but a space I could rebuild. But I had no idea how deep the story still went. Because a few days later, I got an anonymous package. Inside was a flash drive. And what it contained would tear open one more secret, something Mara never meant anyone to see. The envelope had no name, no return address, just a plain white package, slightly padded, sitting at the bottom of my mailbox. I remember standing there for a long minute before picking it up, as if my body already knew this wasn't junk mail. As if my hands were reluctant to touch it. Back inside, I tore it open and tilted the contents into my palm, a flash drive and a single yellow post-it note with 2 words scrawled in tight black ink. "You should know." That was it. I stared at the little USB like it was radioactive. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. I wasn't sure I had anything left inside me to be shattered. But the curiosity was louder than the fear. I plugged it into my laptop. There was only one file. A video. The title was simple, Mara_interview_backroom.mp4. I hovered over the play button. Something about the word interview made me pause. Then I clicked. The video was grainy, clearly shot from a camera placed on a shelf or desk. The angle was awkward, tilted slightly upward like it was meant to record discreetly. A woman walked into frame. Mara. She was wearing the same navy dress from the night she left for the office party. Her posture was perfect, almost exaggerated, like she was performing. She sat across from a man whose face was mostly out of frame, but I could hear his voice clearly. It started off like a job interview. He asked about her skills, her background in corporate event planning, her experience with vendors. She answered confidently, smiling too much, touching her hair. It felt like a scene from a bad movie. Then the tone changed. He said something like, "You know, we have other ways of determining if someone's a good fit." Mara leaned forward, voice dropping an octave. "Oh? What kind of ways?" And then came a moment that made my stomach twist. She laughed. Not nervously. Not awkwardly. Playfully. Seductively. And then she stood up, walked toward the man, and the camera caught just enough to confirm the worst. I slammed the laptop shut. My hands were shaking. That wasn't just infidelity. That wasn't just weakness. That was calculated. It wasn't even Rick, Trevor, or Jay. It was someone else entirely. A man who seemed to be tied to her career, probably someone who helped her land a client or close a deal. And judging by how polished she looked in that video, it wasn't a spontaneous lapse in judgment, it was transactional. Professional. My wife had prostituted her dignity for career leverage and smiled while doing it. I stood up and walked around the room like my body couldn't contain the horror. This wasn't the woman I married. This wasn't the same human being. I felt like I had been in love with a shadow, a projected image, and now suddenly I was seeing what stood behind the light. I didn't know who sent me the video, but I knew why they did it. Someone wanted me to see it. Someone wanted to make sure that I truly understood just how far things had gone. Maybe it was one of her ex-affairs. Maybe someone from the firm. Maybe even the man in the video himself, though the motive was unclear. Regardless, it did what it was intended to do. It killed any hope of forgiveness. That night, I boxed up every photo of us together, not to burn, not to rage, just to put away. I didn't want her face staring back at me from our honeymoon picture while I brushed my teeth. I didn't want her smile framed in the living room while I tried to make coffee. I wasn't bitter. I was free. And that was a strange thing to feel. Because I should have been drowning in sorrow. But all I felt was space. Clean, hard-earned space. The next morning, my lawyer submitted the papers. And later that day, Mara showed up unannounced for the last time. This time, she wasn't crying. She wasn't pretending. She was furious. She knew. I opened the door and there she was. Same woman, same body, same face I used to trace with my fingers every morning. And yet none of it looked familiar anymore. Her makeup was smeared, but not from crying, from rushing. Her hair was pulled back tightly like she hadn't had time to think, only react. Her eyes weren't soft or guilty or sorry. They were furious. "You watch it," she said without a greeting. I didn't respond. She stepped inside without waiting for permission, brushing past me like she still lived there. Like the foundation of trust hadn't been swallowed by fire. "You think you know everything now," she snapped. "You think a single video tells the whole story?" I closed the door behind her and stayed by it, arms crossed. "Then why are you here, Mara? If it's nothing, why are you panicking?" She stopped, turned, eyes blazing. "Because that was private. That wasn't meant to be seen. It wasn't what it looked like." I laughed quietly. It came from a place of exhaustion, not cruelty. It looked exactly like what it was. "It was an arrangement," she hissed. "It had nothing to do with you. It had nothing to do with us." "Everything you do when you're married has to do with us," I said, my voice low and steady. "You just didn't care anymore." That hit her. Her face tightened like I'd slapped her with the truth. She tried to pivot. "You had no right to go through my laptop. I didn't go through it to punish you. I went through it because I needed answers. But the flash drive? That didn't come from me. Someone sent it. Someone who knew." That stopped her cold. I watched her brain process that detail. Her pupils darted slightly, scanning internal memories. She wasn't worried about me seeing it, she was worried about who else had. "That's why you filed already," she murmured. "You watched that video and now you want to punish me." "I filed because you chose everyone but me. And the only thing you're worried about right now is your own exposure." She looked like she was about to scream. Instead, she turned and paced through the kitchen, muttering half-formed phrases. "It wasn't supposed to end like this. Not like this. Not with everyone knowing." And then it hit me. "You're not upset you cheated," I said slowly. "You're upset people found out." She turned toward me, defeated. "What do you want me to say, Jeremy? That I'm a monster? That I made selfish choices? Fine. I did. But I built a career, I built connections, I made something of myself while you stayed in the background playing the safe husband. I needed more." I stepped closer and something in me went still. "I was never the background," I said. "I was the foundation. You just never looked down long enough to realize it." She didn't reply. I handed her a second envelope from the counter. "It's from my attorney. It's official now. We'll be going through mediation. I don't want anything ugly, just clean. You'll receive the full filing this week." She didn't open it. She just stared at the floor, then looked up with eyes that had shifted, not angry now, but strangely empty. "You really mean it," she whispered. "You're done." "I meant it the night I saw you smile at him like that in the hallway." She held back tears. Not because she didn't want to cry, but because she didn't want to show me anything I hadn't already seen. And then the quietest part of the conversation fell like a bomb. "There's something else," she said. "You're not the only one who got a copy of that flash drive." "What do you mean?" Her voice cracked for the first time. "Someone's leaking things. HR. My supervisor. 2 of our vendors. They all received anonymous messages with attachments. They've frozen my client access. I'm being investigated. So that was it. The cracks in her double life had begun to cave in, and not just with me. I should have felt vindicated. But I didn't. I just felt hollow. You should leave, I said. She looked at me one last time as if searching for a doorway back into my forgiveness. But there was nothing there. And then she walked out quietly, no slamming doors, no last words. And I stood in the foyer, heart pounding, knowing I had just lived through the true end of our marriage. But what I didn't know yet was that the flash drive wasn't the only package. There was another. And it wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to her boss's wife. I didn't know who sent the second flash drive, but I knew exactly why they did. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. A few days after Mara stormed out, her lawyer tried calling me. Twice. I didn't pick up. Then an email arrived. They wanted to discuss the contents of the anonymous materials circulating outside the marriage. Their tone was aggressive, full of fear, not control. I didn't respond. Because this wasn't about lawsuits anymore. This was about everything finally catching up to her. Her world, the one she'd carefully built from polished Instagram moments and fake conference calls, was collapsing under the weight of its own lies. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned that the package had, in fact, reached her boss's wife. The fallout was immediate. Her firm went into PR lockdown. She was placed on administrative leave, pending an internal investigation. Sponsors began pulling out of her projects. And the affair partner she thought she could rely on? He blocked her number and ghosted her like she never existed. Poetic. But I didn't celebrate. I didn't post anything. I didn't gossip. I didn't even tell my closest friends every detail. Because none of this was about watching her suffer. It was about letting her go. 1 week later, the papers were finalized. No drama. No courtroom show. No final scream across a judge's desk. Just ink, signatures, and closure. And on the day it all became official, I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove west. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just packed a bag, put the dogs in the car, and left before sunrise. I watched the sky change from gray to soft pink, listened to the wind rush through the open windows, and let the old version of myself fade in the rearview mirror. I stopped by the ocean. Not because I had some dramatic moment planned. Just because I wanted to sit and breathe in something endless. Something clean. Something that didn't ask me to be anyone's safety net or consolation prize. I walked the beach for a while, letting the cold sand slip between my toes. And at one point, I saw an older man sitting alone with a sketchpad in his lap. He looked peaceful. Not because he was happy, but because he looked like he'd been through the fire and come out on the other side. He looked at me and nodded. I nodded back. No words. Just that. And it felt like enough. When I returned home a few days later, the house didn't feel haunted anymore. Felt like mine again. I painted the bedroom. Got rid of the wine glasses we never used. Donated the framed quotes she once hung in the hallway. I didn't keep souvenirs of a lie. And then, one Sunday afternoon, something simple happened that reminded me why I kept going. I went to a small cafe new in town and sat near the window with a book. I wasn't trying to meet anyone. I wasn't looking for healing in someone else. I was just enjoying the quiet. And then she walked in. Not Mara. Someone else. A woman with messy curls, paint on her fingers, and a laugh that sounded like it belonged to someone who'd lost things too, but hadn't let those losses make her bitter. We locked eyes for a second. She smiled. Not flirtatious. Just human. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled back without pretending. I didn't know her name, but for the first time I realized I didn't need anyone to complete me. I was whole already, not because I got justice, not because I won, but because I finally chose myself. And that was the real beginning.